Hi, I'm Arthur Zaczkiewicz, and welcome to Corner Fit Street Talk. Today we'll be talking with Maher, who's the founder of M7 Innovations. He's a futurist, a keynote speaker. He speaks at South by Southwest, as well as CES. He also is a part of the MIT Media Lab consortium. And we're going to be talking today about AI and agentic commerce mostly, and how it's really taking over every corner of the fashion industry today. It's having implications not only on the brand and retail side, but for the consumer, and it's really changing the landscape. Before we get into today's conversation, if you're not already signed up for Street Talk newsletter, head to streettalk.studio and join a few thousand retail and fashion executives getting the week's most important signals every Monday morning. It's free, it's sharp, and it takes about 4 minutes to read. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Instagram at Street Talk Studio. Now let's get into it. Hi, I'm Arthur Zaczkiewicz, and welcome to Corner Fit's Street Talk. This is where we share insights about fashion apparel, retail, beauty, technology, retail real estate, and more, while also answering this key question: what does fashion apparel, retail, and retail tech mean to you? Today, we welcome Maher, who is the founder of M7 Innovations. Matt, thanks so much for taking time today to talk with us. There's so much going on, and I know we're going to try to get through this in the next 20 minutes and kind of discuss what has happened, especially with AI and agentic AI. Anyway, but first, before we do that, tell me about M7 Innovations. What do you guys do, and who are some of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, honored to be here, Arthur. Huge fan of the show. I love it's kind of like Street Talk. So I can give you the Street Talk version of what M7 is, Street being the real raw, what we are, and the talk being the high strategic level. So I'll reverse it. At the high strategic level, M7, we are an independent research and development firm. And our main focus is really to help brands kind of navigate into the future, not just predicting and saying, here's what's going to happen, but really kind of take them by the hand and guide them into that future. And I'd say that the street version of it, to borrow a metaphor from a movie that's very popular right now, The Devil Wears Prada 2, we are metaphorically the Anne Hathaway. I'm a less attractive and less talented version of Anne Hathaway, and our suite of clients are a bunch of Meryl Streeps, and we're whispering in their ear of kind of what's coming next, and we're the first phone call when something goes right, and also the first phone call when something goes wrong. So that's kind of in a nutshell what M7.
So a year ago, I had no idea what AI agents were. It's suddenly upon us, and we were just trying to figure out from a journalist, like how companies are using generative AI, predictive analytics, predictive AI, and then suddenly the future is here. What the books through? What is agentic commerce, and what are the implications for retailers and brands?
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. I'll start with this. When I was at South by Southwest this year, I saw this stat in a keynote that I was like, oh my goodness. It was Google search trends for the term agentic commerce, which is around the hundreds of millions of searches. That same query, Arthur, 18 months ago, literally didn't exist. Like, it wasn't even a blip. It wasn't even hitting the threshold of thousands to even show up on Google's trend. And now we have hundreds of millions of queries in that. We have businesses and brands literally transforming their entire organization to prepare for agentic commerce. So that just shows like the rate of acceleration. It also shows, I'd say, uniquely in the US, we really glom onto a trend or a phrase and we start racing in that direction. And I think what we'll unpack today is like, what is the actualized space in which you need to act and operate with agentic commerce, and what is kind of like noise that you don't really need to worry about. I think the best way I try to explain it is really to delineate two things. There's kind of discovery, AI first search, where, AI agents are essentially surfacing new information, giving you more basically information on the brand and on the product, and making you like superhuman in terms of your knowledge of purchasing. And then there's the other side of it, which is actual purchase, like end-to-end transactions with agents. That's where agentic commerce really pops up more of like an agent's going to go out to a retailer and buy this for me. I really like to delineate those two because on the front end in that discovery, we're at critical mass. We're at 900 million weekly active users on GPT, 500 million on Gemini, 2.5 billion AI first search queries a day. Clients in luxury and retail are using AI first search, and brands have to not only plan, but actionize that immediately. When it comes to end-to-end agents going to the major retailers and making all these purchases on behalf of a client, we're not there yet. It's a directionally correct future, but it is not so immediate and at mass adoption at this moment that brands need to drop everything to do it. So you break those two apart. One is realized and brands have to actualize and action on it now. The other one is a directionally correct future. It's just not here yet.
Here's my kind of pickle when I try to think about this. When generative AI came onto the board, everybody was, hollering about it and waving flags, and they were jumping it, but they didn't really have a strategy. Is that the same thing? What's required for agentic AI?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of thing in trends. If you think of AI, you were right. 2024, I would say, was the year of AI aspiration. It's all these new tools, all these things that we can do. Imagine what our businesses will be like. 2025 was the year of AI action. So now we have pilots and initiatives, and we're trying Copilot, and we're doing all these things at our companies. And I'd say 2026, we're now at the era of like assessment, AI assessment. Is it working? Am I getting a return on investment? Am I generating enough marketing materials that are actually working, that are going out into the world? And I think that assessment period is going to extend out into 2027. And I think the next major piece is, especially for retailers, especially for luxury, is, am I going to have to build a digital footprint on my own and operated and social that is going to have to speak to humans? And is it going to have to speak to agents? Because that is a massive undertaking. If we think of the .com era of saying, okay, 0 to 1, we never had a website, but now there's e-commerce. What does that look like? Let's build a website. Let's have a social presence. It's a totally different world to build a site or build a digital footprint for agents. In the .com world, it was saying, okay, we have a physical footprint. Let's actually bring all that brand experience to, a digital .com page. But the way agents operate, and we can get into this, the way agents are kind of like operators on behalf of humans, the way they parse information, the way they look for inventory, the way they kind of amalgamate pricing and discounts and all these things is just so different than has subjective human search and buy and purchase. So I think that's where there's this real tension right now with retailers to say, like, do I need to build for this? A, and B, how the heck do I do this?
And from the consumer's perspective, how is the brand appear? Like, whether it's search or whether it's shopping for you, and how do you control your brand as a brand or a retailer so the consumer doesn't get all, wonky and upset?
It's a great question. I like to say, back in the Google days when it was purely only Google search, you had many levers you could essentially pull. If you're a challenger brand or a 100-year-old iconic, fashion or retail house, there are different levers you could pull. If you're not showing up above the fold, you could pay some money. You do a little SEM, you can kind of get above that fold. There were some SEO tricks you could do to kind of get to the top. But there was one player, and it was Google, and we could all kind of have the same playbook into how to kind of get a share of voice. Now you enter ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and Grok, and you have completely different models that use different, probabilistic statistical frameworks to kind of surface your brand. And all that really means is, in the Google days, we went out and surfed the internet. And now what's happening is AI first search is surfing the internet for us, and it's bringing the internet to us in a single box. And to me, that's like the aperture of the internet is just starting to shrink for consumers. And if you're a brand outside of that aperture, you just really don't exist. And there's no more lever you can pull to kind of just put enough money in front of GPT or any of these to say, hey, redirect or advert their attention to show my brand first. So brand equity in this new era of the internet becomes really, really interesting because it no longer is the money you can spend. In fact, paid media is invisible to these AI agents because to them it's propaganda. It's you paying to get your message out there. So the strategy changes. It's Reddit, it's YouTube, it's third party, it's PR, it's getting on your podcast, it's the transcript that's going to be out there that's going to actually feed these LLMs to actually surface your brand. So what that means is silos need to break down at a lot of these retailers. Your PR team, your SEO team, your paid media team, your digital team, they need to be talking to each other because it needs to be a unified strategy in this brave new world.
What do you mean by the invisible AI interface? Is that what's under the hood, behind the scenes, and always working?
Yeah, if you go back for the past 20 years, every marketer, every CMO, you're trying to map that entire consumer journey. You're trying to find out, where did this consumer first see my brand, and what are all the touch points that person went through before they made a transaction? And then, of course, what happened post-transaction, how to create loyalty. And for 20 years, we're using different forms of ad tech to try to make that a complete picture. Enter AI first search. These are by definition black boxes. Again, probabilistic statistical models of which we cannot see inside. So all of a sudden now you're going from awareness to consideration, sometimes due to transaction, and we have no idea what's actually happening within this model. Unlike Google, where you could look at search trends, you could look at Google's data and say, here's what people are doing. You're now having, again, when I talk about 900 million weekly active users on ChatGPT, they're having individual one-on-one conversations. And there's literally never a duplicate answer, right? Because that's what a probabilistic statistical model does. It's a net new answer every time. It's just putting the next token in sequence. So if you're a brand now, you don't even know what essentially is being said. You don't know if they're referencing your .com page or referencing something someone said on Reddit or YouTube. You don't know if you're being synthesized in the answer or actually extracted as a source. And that gets really hard to then attribute what's actually being said about your brand. And if I actually extrapolate that out to agentic commerce, when these agents like ChatGPT's Atlas or Perplexity's Comet are going out and actually purchasing on behalf of you, it looks like a human. And we've tested this with all our clients, and I've bought many things agentically. It looks like a human actually surfing your web or .com. And then that gets the data even dirtier and messier because now you're not even understanding, is this an agent? Is this a human? So all that to say, that consumer journey that we were trying to map, well, forget that, because now it's basically invisible. We're not seeing all these different steps that a consumer's taking to get to that point where they're going to make that decision and buy. So it's a little bit of faith now to say, which model should we over-index for? Should we cater more towards the Reddits and the YouTubes? Do we want to show up more in Gemini or GPT? A lot of really hard questions that are happening at brands today.
And what about the data itself? Like, as a merchandiser, can I learn from these shopping bots and what they're doing? I mean, how do I use agentic commerce to inform my own creative decisions? Or is that even a question anymore?
I think the best thing that brands can do now is just to really make sure the data hygiene, their schemas, their inventory lists are up to date. So what's happening, again, because we kind of live on the cutting edge on the tech side, there are all these different protocols that essentially exist. Google came out with UCP, the Universal Commerce Protocol. They want that to be kind of the de facto protocol for all commerce across the internet. Lo and behold, right now we're tracking it. There's about 9 concurrent protocols from OpenAI, from Google, from Anthropic, from Coinbase, from Microsoft. Everyone's trying to fight for that singular protocol. The same way, we live with HDMI now, but there were all different cable types before HDMI became the winner or the universal protocol for, plugging in the screen. Same thing now with commerce. So the tricky thing is, as I said before with Google, there was just one entity of which we could all strategize around. We all had a playbook. We all used that playbook a different way. Now it's 4 or 5 different playbooks. So what I generally say when clients say, where do I place my bet? Should I just place my bet all on Google? I'd say, okay, well, there's 2.5 billion queries happening in ChatGPT and 900 million people over there. So I wouldn't just do Google because we have to be ready for GPT as well, where all these conversations are happening. So it's almost like a spreading of the bets. It's saying, hey, there's one thing we know to be true. As long as your inventory and your data is good and what you're feeding GPT and Claude from Anthropic and Gemini are clean, there's going to be less headache for you on the back end, because at the end of the day, what these companies are doing are just APIing into your actual .com to understand what inventory is, to understand what you're offering, to pull copy from your site. So step 1 is always like, make sure your house is in order. Don't bet the farm on a single protocol or a single company. And if you do that, you're going to be more protected that once a protocol wins out, you'll be able to kind of place more of your chips on that in that future.
What about the product display page? Is that becoming more important? Does that have a more of a central role, especially as being scrubbed by an agent?
I think they're absolutely critical. If you look at what these agents are kind of parsing out, again, they're so different than humans. And I was just at MIT last week. We're one of the 35 partners of MIT in their consortium lab membership. We get access to kind of some of their studies before they go public and their PhDs and scientists. And I can't speak about all the data yet, but 2 really interesting studies are coming out now where they're really starting to test how agents parse out information and what actually works in terms of the different nudges through copy you can use on a PDP, exactly as you're saying, Arthur, of, saying that it's selling out or it's a best-selling item paired with a review, paired with kind of some corroborating evidence is going to surface that up first. And another study they have, which is fascinating, is how these AI and agents are looking at photos or looking at images on your sites, right? If you have, the minimalist white backdrop for, the beautiful jacket, they don't like that as much. But if it's a, hand-painted tile in the Mediterranean overlooking the Amalfi Coast, they're going to take that photo and actually surface it up higher. So again, it's a dual audience now for brands to say, what are the AIs going to look for? What are these agents going to look for that's going to surface me essentially to the top? Because it is a similar game to Google. You just want to be in pole position. You want to be in that aperture. but it's a different set of rules that you have to play by.
Let's talk a little bit more about the consumer experience. Well, what happens, and then we spoke about this in an article prior about when they make a mistake and they order the wrong product, where does the liability live?
Well, it's a great question because there's the actual liability and there's like the perceptual liability. So again, in the actual liability, and this is why in one of your articles that I really loved, we started breaking this down of you're starting to see Target updating their T's and C's to say we will not be liable for agents. You have Amazon winning a landmark lawsuit against Perplexity, banning any agentic commerce agents coming to Amazon to buy. You see Walmart really changing their language on Sparky, their agent, of what's liable or not. So every one of these retailers are kind of putting up armor to say, hey, that actualized liability is not going to be our fault. That's going to be the agent's fault. So go talk to Anthropic, go talk to OpenAI, go talk to Google. But the damage is going to be done when it happens. As a consumer, again, who are you essentially going to blame when it doesn't show up? Your agent's going to look like it fulfilled it, and all of a sudden that package from Walmart or Amazon or Saks Fifth just didn't show up. And even though it was a technical error based on the agent, Saks and Amazon and Walmart, they didn't make good by it. And just saying like, hey, it's not my fault, that's really hard, especially in 2026 when the consumers are so fickle. They're not loyal to any retailers like they used to be. So I think you have to delineate what is an actualized liability versus perceptual. I think all the retailers are being smart about mitigating the actualized liability, saying, hey, returns are an $890 billion problem now. Get ready to crest easily into the trillions with agentic commerce. But I don't know how the perceptual liability is going to work other than a good marketing messages that they're going to have to continue to push out, like not our fault, not our fault, not our fault.
This may sound a little esoteric, but what is, from the consumer's perspective, what is the shopping journey today? Like how has it changed? Like where does it start? Where does it end? Does it start? Does it end in the same place? Is it completely different? But what's your perception on that?
So we map it out on a spectrum. So I'll give you 3 examples and let's go from one side of the spectrum. This is what I would call low cost, low emotion. So your toothbrush, your toilet paper, these are things that if an agent can find the best price, get it to you as quick as possible and corroborate it with all the good reviews, I believe humans will be totally fine with letting Amazon's Rufus or their Gemini agent go make those low cost, low emotion purchases. Middle cost, middle emotion. Think now, a bicycle, a crib, a refrigerator. This is now something where I don't see too many people walking around with like a Whirlpool hat or like a Samsung shirt.
Right.
There's not much loyalty for these things, but you're going to spend $5,000 or $10,000 on a refrigerator. I think people will be a little reticent to let an agent just go off and try to buy that on your behalf. So we call it the human handoff. We think there's AI first search, there's all that discovery, there's all that consideration with information, but then the human essentially wants to take over to actually put their credit card in to make that actual purchase. So the handoff, I would say, happens in the middle of the consumer journey. Now let's go high cost, high emotion, the final step. Now think this is a car, this is a house, this is a luxury handbag. This is something where I believe, yes, there might be some search with AI up front to maybe compare, but the human hands that off and takes that from the AI a lot earlier, because not only at a high ticket price, you don't want the agent to buy this end to end, but when it comes to luxury, when it comes to a lot of retail, to a lot of fashion, it is all subjective. And again, we go back to the consumer. I don't think there's a social faux pas that's worse that someone's saying like, oh, Arthur, you look fantastic in that blazer. You look really good. And you say, thanks, Gemini picked it. I just put a prompt in and said I'd look good at it. I mean, it shows you don't have taste. Did you not think about that for yourself? So again, especially in retail, I think that's why we're seeing nostalgia culture. We're seeing thrifting coming up more. We're seeing secondary market because it's when AI is all kind of reductive, it's infinite creations, infinite everything. The ability to find something scarce, to find something retro is actually so much more powerful. And that's actually more of a status symbol, I would say now, more than just the high end ticket item and price.
I don't know, did you go to the NRF show in New York?
NRF, CES, we usually hit them all. We try to hit them all.
So I been going to NRF for decades, it seems. And I go there, everybody's so excited. There's the CIOs there, technology offices, there's senior VPs. They're stunned. They walk the show floor, especially, and there's all these new gadgets, these new things that they get into their tech stack. It's like an opium den, right? They get all high and happy. Then they go back to the headquarters and they're like, they're trying to convince their CFO to make these investments. And then they're like, nah, do you see a disconnect between the technology in the market and the culture of the C-suite and investing in those technologies? And how do you bridge that?
First of all, NRF as an opium den. I'm going to steal that because I think that's a fantastic metaphor there. And you're right. The CIOs get really excited, but then the high starts to wear off when they're talking to the CFO, and they can't share that feeling with the CFO. I would argue it kind of goes back to that point of AI first search versus agentic commerce and agents operating and buying all these things. There are elements where you can come back to a CFO and say, hey, we are not showing up in GPT. We are not showing up here. And these are at a critical mass to invest in this and figure this out and partner with the Profounds and Evertunes of the world, which are AI brand monitoring firms, to get more information about how we're showing up and then course correct quickly. I think that's a legitimate argument you can make to a CFO. But yes, coming back from that high of NRF and saying, hey, we need to partner with this new company and build an entire side-loaded website built for agents that's going to be, this like crazy robots TXT enhanced thing that's going to help them shop, take the agent's hand and get them right to the PDP page so they can check out. If I'm the CFO, I'd say, okay, how many people are shopping agentically right now? And the CIO goes, there's dozens of us. And it's like, okay, that's not at a critical mass. We don't need to build for that infrastructure right now. So why don't we just talk to the data team, clean up some of your schemas and inventory lists, and that's enough for now. So I think a good CIO is going to be able to parse out what is shiny versus what has substance, because I do think there is some substance at NRF. But yes, it's uneven remainders in terms of so many shiny objects or solutions that are desperately looking for problems that just don't exist yet.
Last question. What does fashion apparel, retail technology mean to you on a personal level, on a professional level?
I do love that question because I have, about like 3 or 4 outfits that I just basically interchange all the time. And that's on purpose, right? I think fashion for me and luxury and retail, like it is all so subjective. I mean, it is so identity based. And that's the same thing for me too, right? It's like what you wear, everything it speaks volumes about yourself. It's why we've seen so many trends kind of come in. Quiet luxury has been a really big one as of late. It's like you go from trying to show how expensive your bag is in your outfit to you get more social clout if you're more quiet luxury. So, to me, when anything is identity driven, I think we're more averse from using tools like AI to make those kind of selections because, again, our identity is like the last bastion of something that we can control. So to me, again, fashion, retail, all of that is just so personal and it can evolve as we do as humans. So that's, again, why I try to lay out that spectrum because I do think there is a moat that retail and fashion specifically have that humans are still very much going to be in the loop and kind of wresting control from AI agents and saying, yes, thank you for all that research. Thank you for finding me where I can maybe find that handbag, but I got it from here and I'm going to make that final decision because it's taste, it's subjective, and it's tied to my identity.
We're out of time, Matt. A pleasure. I'm going to have you come back on again at a later date. That was great conversation. Thank you. And thanks for tuning in. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Arthur.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Street Talk. If today's conversation was useful, the best thing you could do is share it with a colleague. It generally helps us grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a review. It takes 30 seconds and makes a real difference. For the full episode write-up, show notes, and our weekly newsletter, visit streettalk.studio. We're also on LinkedIn and Instagram at Street Talk Studio. We'll be back next week, and thanks for listening.